please untie it. I'll give you a child tonight." The giant widow whispered to the rancher from beneath the gallows rope, her 6'2" frame trembling as sweat poured down her bronze skin in the August heat. But Owen Caldwell froze in shock, his knife halfway to the bindings, because this desperate woman had just offered him the one impossible thing his dying body craved most. Dalton Dally Reeves had been strung up like an animal for 3 hours, her muscular arms stretched high above her head, wrists bleeding from the coarse rope, accused of murdering the husband she'd actually loved. The widow stood on tiptoes in her torn dress while men passed whiskey and laughed, waiting for sunset when they'd hang her for a crime she didn't commit. Above her head, a wooden sign mocked her suffering: "Men don't forgive Owen Caldwell." The 38-year-old rancher, coughing blood into his handkerchief every morning, had lost his wife and son 5 years ago and knew he had maybe 6 months before consumption took him too. He'd come to town for medicine, not to witness an execution. But when the giant widow saw him through the crowd, she made her desperate offer: "Please untie it. I'll give you a child tonight," because she knew he was the only man in Redemption Creek who still had a soul, and the only man powerful enough to stand against the corrupt banker who wanted her dead. The rancher froze in shock because this widow wasn't just offering her body as payment for freedom. She was offering him a legacy, an heir, a reason for his dying life to have meant something. All he had to do was cut her down and damn every consequence. But why would a widow facing death offer to bear a child for a dying rancher she barely knew? What made her so certain he would risk everything to save her? And what happened when Owen's knife finally cut through those ropes? Would she keep her desperate promise? Or was this just the lie of a woman who'd say anything to survive? Why would a giant widow's offer of a child make a dying rancher freeze in shock instead of walking away? And what would one night together cost them both when the sun came up? The August sun hammered down on Redemption Creek like a blacksmith's anvil, turning the dusty street into a furnace that made grown men squint and horses hang their heads low. Owen had pulled his mare to a stop outside the mercantile, reaching for his handkerchief because the cough was coming again. When he pulled the cloth away from his mouth, red dots speckled the white fabric like scattered rose petals. He was running out of time, and he knew it. That's when he heard the laughter. It wasn't good laughter, not the kind that comes from joy or friendship. This was the cruel sound men make when they're watching something suffer and calling it entertainment. Owen's stomach turned over. He'd heard that sound before, during the war, right before things got ugly. He urged his horse forward through the crowd, and people moved aside because even dying, Owen Caldwell still carried himself like a man you didn't want to cross. That's when he saw her, a woman hung from the old gallows at the edge of town, her arms stretched high above her head, thick rope binding her wrists to the wooden crossbeam. She was tall, taller than most of the men watching her, with broad shoulders and muscular arms that glistened with sweat. Her dress was torn, hanging off one shoulder, covered in dust and what looked like dried blood. Her feet barely touched the ground, forcing her to stand on her toes. And Owen could see her legs shaking with the strain of holding herself up, but it was her face that made him stop breathing. Dalton Reeves, Dally. He'd seen her around town over the years, always noticed her, because you couldn't miss a woman that tall, that strong, that different. Her father had been Shoshone, her mother Scottish, and the combination had given her bronze skin, high cheekbones, and eyes so dark they looked black. She'd married Marcus Reeves 3 years ago, and Owen remembered thinking Marcus was a lucky man. Now here she was, strung up like an animal, and above her head someone had nailed a rough wooden sign that read, "Men don't forgive." Hell of a sight, ain't she? The voice belonged to Earl Hawkins, one of Cyrus Blackwell's men. He took a long drink from a whiskey bottle and grinned. Big woman like that, you'd think she could snap those ropes like thread. But she's been hanging there since noon. Arms must be numb by now. Owen's jaw tightened. What's she accused of? Murder. Killed her husband Marcus in his sleep, then set fire to the barn to hide the evidence. Earl spat tobacco juice into the dirt. Sheriff says she hangs at sunset if nobody claims responsibility for her. But who'd want a husband killer? Owen looked at Dally's face. Her eyes were closed against the brutal sun, her lips cracked and bleeding. Sweat ran down her neck in rivers, soaking into what remained of her dress. Her whole body trembled, not just from holding herself up, but from something deeper, fear maybe, or rage, or the simple knowledge that she was going to die, and there wasn't a damn thing she could do about it. Owen dismounted slowly. His boots hit the hard-packed earth, and the sound seemed too loud in the sudden quiet. The crowd's laughter had stopped. Everyone was watching him now. Caldwell, Earl's voice carried a warning. Blackwell said nobody interferes with the prisoner. Owen ignored him. He walked straight to the gallows platform, his steps steady despite the burning in his lungs. He stopped directly in front of Dally, close enough to see the rope burns on her wrists, the purple bruises on her arms, the way her chest heaved with each labored breath. Her eyes opened. When she saw him, something flickered across her face, recognition, then hope, then calculation, all in the space of a heartbeat. "Owen Caldwell," she said. Her voice was hoarse, barely more than a whisper. "Didn't expect to see you here." "Didn't expect to see you hanging from a rope," he replied quietly. A ghost of a smile touched her cracked lips. "Life's full of surprises. Did you kill Marcus?" "No." The word was flat, absolute, with no room for doubt. "But nobody cares what I say. Blackwell wants my land. This is how he gets it." Owen had suspected as much. Cyrus Blackwell had been buying up property around Redemption Creek for 2 years, trying to build a cattle empire. The Reeves land had water rights that made it worth killing for. Owen's own ranch bordered it, which meant he was probably next on Blackwell's list. "Caldwell." Earl's voice rose, sharp with warning. "Step away from the prisoner, or the sheriff will arrest you too." Owen didn't move. He studied Dally's face. The strong jaw, the high cheekbones, the eyes that held more courage than most men he'd known. Even strung up and dying, she looked more alive than half the people in this town. "Why'd they put up that sign?" he asked softly. Dally's laugh was bitter and dry. "Because 2 days after Marcus died in that fire, Blackwell came to my house with flowers and a proposal. Said he'd take care of me, protect me, make me respectable. When I told him I'd rather die alone than marry him, he said I might get my wish." She shifted her weight, grimacing as the rope dug deeper into her raw wrists. "Turns out he was a man of his word. What happens at sunset? They hang me. Blackwell's paid Sheriff Grady to look the other way. Nobody in this town will speak for me. I'm half Shoshone, which makes me less than human to most of these people. And I'm a woman who refused to know her place." Her dark eyes locked onto his. "I'm already dead, Owen. It's just a matter of how long it takes." The crowd was getting restless. Owen could feel their attention shifting, the mood turning uglier. Men who'd been content to watch were starting to want action. Someone threw a rock that hit the platform near Dally's feet. She didn't flinch. Owen should walk away. He knew that. He was dying himself. Consumption had him by the throat, eating him from the inside out. Every doctor he'd seen gave him the same news. 6 months, maybe a year if he was lucky. He didn't need to make enemies of the most powerful men in the territory in whatever time he had left. But then Dally spoke again, and her words stopped his heart. "Please untie it," she whispered, leaning forward as far as the ropes would allow. "Please, Owen, I'll give you a child tonight." Owen froze. The words hung in the scorching air between them like something solid, something real. The noise of the crowd faded to nothing. The heat, the dust, the shouting, all of it disappeared. There was only her voice, those words, and the impossible offer they carried. "What did you say?" Dally's eyes bore into his with an intensity that made him feel like she was looking straight through his skin, into his soul. "I know about Rebecca. I know you lost your son. I know the consumption is killing you, and you're terrified you'll die without leaving anything behind." She paused, her breath coming in gasps. "I'm strong, Owen, healthy. My mother had 9 children, all of them survived. I can give you what you need. An heir, a legacy, someone to carry your name when you're gone. Cut me down, take me to your ranch, and tonight I'll prove it." Owen's heart hammered so hard he thought his ribs might crack. "You can't promise that. I can try. And if God is merciful, I'll give you a son before the year is out." A single tear cut through the dust on her face. "I have nothing else to offer you, Owen. No money. Blackwell will take it all. No land, no property, nothing but my body and my word. One night. That's all I'm asking. One night, and I'll give you everything I have." The crowd was pressing closer now. Owen heard Earl calling for the sheriff, heard boots pounding on the wooden sidewalk. In minutes, armed men would arrive, and any chance of freeing her would be gone forever. Why me? Owen's voice came out rough, broken. "Because you're the only man in this town who looked at me like I was human," Dally said. 5 years ago, when the creek flooded, I helped you save your cattle. You thanked me. You looked me in the eyes and treated me like a person, not a freak or a savage. Because you own the water rights Blackwell needs, which means you're the only man he can't completely destroy. And because I'm begging you, Owen Caldwell." Her voice cracked. "I've never begged anyone for anything in my entire life. But I'm begging you now, please, please don't let me die like this." Owen stood there with the sun beating down on his shoulders and his lungs burning with every breath, staring at this extraordinary woman who just offered him the one thing he wanted more than life itself. A child, a son. A reason for his death to mean something, for his life to have mattered. All he had to do was cut her down. "Caldwell!" Sheriff Tom Grady's voice cut through the crowd like a whip. "Step away from the prisoner right now, or I'll arrest you for obstruction of justice." Owen turned slowly. The sheriff stood 20 feet away with his hand on his gun. Behind him, Cyrus Blackwell himself had arrived, a tall, slim man in an expensive grey suit, his silver hair gleaming in the sunlight like polished metal. "He looked like money and power and everything wrong with the world, Mr. Caldwell," Blackwell said, his voice smooth as oil. "I understand you're a compassionate man, but this woman has been tried and convicted of murder. Justice must be served. There was no trial," Owen said flatly. "Just you and your bought judge signing papers." Blackwell's smile didn't reach his cold blue eyes. "Be careful, Owen, you're not well. Consumption is a dangerous disease. Wouldn't want you to have an accident before your time." The threat was clear as glass. Owen looked at the sheriff, at Blackwell, at the crowd of men who'd spent 3 hours watching a woman suffer and calling it entertainment. Then he looked at Dally. She wasn't begging anymore. She just watched him with those knowing dark eyes, and he saw in them the same thing he felt every morning when he coughed up blood, the absolute certainty of death, and the desperate clawing need to leave something behind that proved you'd existed, that your life had meant something. Owen reached down and pulled his knife from his belt. The blade caught the sunlight and flashed like lightning. "Don't do it, Caldwell," Sheriff Grady warned, pulling his revolver. "I will shoot you!" Owen stepped up onto the gallows platform. The wood creaked under his boots. He reached up toward the rope binding Dally's wrists, and she looked at him with such raw gratitude it nearly broke him. "You're making a serious mistake," Blackwell said quietly. Owen cut the rope. Dally collapsed against Owen the instant the rope gave way, her full weight nearly knocking him off the platform. He caught her, feeling solid muscle beneath sun-scorched skin, feeling her whole body shake as blood rushed back into her arms. She cried out, the sound raw and animal, as sensation returned to limbs that had been numb for hours. The crowd erupted. Men shouted. Sheriff Grady cocked his pistol with a sharp metallic click that cut through the noise. Owen half-carried, half-dragged Dally off the platform, supporting her weight as her legs buckled beneath her. Every step burned his lungs like breathing fire, but he kept moving. "Stop right there." Grady's voice cracked like a whip. Owen ignored him. He got Dally to his horse, tried to lift her, but she was too heavy, and he was too weak. The consumption had stolen his strength along with his future. Then Dally grabbed the saddle horn with trembling hands and pulled herself up with a grunt of pure determination. Owen climbed up behind her, wrapping one arm around her waist to hold her steady. She sagged against him, her back against his chest, her breathing ragged. "You just signed your death warrant, Caldwell," Blackwell called out. His voice was ice-cold now, all pretense of civility gone. Owen looked down at him from horseback. "I'm already dying. Might as well die for something that matters." He tightened his grip on Dally. "She's under my protection now. Anyone who touches her answers to me and my water rights. You know the ones, Sweet Creek. The ones you need to make your empire work. She dies, those rights go to the Shoshone tribe. Documents already signed." Blackwell's face went white, then red. The water rights were worth more than 10 properties. Owen didn't wait. He spurred his horse forward, and they rode out of Redemption Creek at a gallop, leaving a cloud of dust and shouting men behind them. Owen's ranch appeared on the horizon as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of blood orange and deep purple. Dally had been silent the entire ride, her body rigid with pain, her breathing shallow. When they reached the porch, Owen dismounted and helped her down. Her legs gave out immediately, and they both crashed to the wooden planks in a tangle of limbs. "I'm sorry," she gasped. "My arms, I can't. Don't apologize." Owen struggled to his feet, then helped her inside. The ranch house was simple, one main room with a kitchen area, a bedroom off to the side, a stone fireplace that hadn't seen a fire in weeks. Dust covered everything. He'd stopped caring about things like cleaning when he'd started dying. He lowered Dally onto his bed, and she collapsed with a groan that sounded like it came from her bones. Her wrists were torn and bleeding, her arms mottled with bruises. Owen fetched water and clean cloth, began washing the wounds as gently as he could. She hissed through her teeth, but didn't pull away. "Why did you really cut me down?" she asked suddenly, her dark eyes studying his face. "And don't say it was the right thing to do. Men don't risk everything for what's right." "Not anymore." Owen wrung out the cloth, watching pink water drip into the basin. "Because you offered me something I stopped believing in. A child. Hope." He met her gaze. "I've been dying for months, Dally. Every morning I wake up wondering if this is the day I cough up enough blood to drown in it. I sold off half my cattle to pay for medicine that doesn't work. I wrote letters to my sister saying goodbye. I made peace with death." He paused. "Then you offered me a reason to want to live." Dally's hand found his, her grip surprisingly strong despite her ordeal. "I meant what I said, Owen. Tonight I keep my promises. You don't owe me anything." "Yes, I do. You gave me my life back. Let me give you yours." Night fell over the ranch like a blanket, bringing with it a coolness that made the scorching day feel like a distant memory. Owen sat on the porch, listening to the crickets sing and watching stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. Inside, Dally was washing up using the water he'd heated for her on the stove. His hands trembled as he rolled a cigarette. Not from fear, but from something he couldn't name. Anticipation, maybe, or the strange weightlessness that comes when you've burned all your bridges and can't go back. The door creaked open behind him. Dally stepped out wearing one of his old shirts, the fabric hanging loose on her tall frame. Her hair was down now, falling past her shoulders in thick black waves. In the lamplight spilling from the doorway, she looked different, softer but no less strong. "Second thoughts?" she asked quietly. "1,000 of them." Owen took a drag from his cigarette. "But I'm still here." She sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Dally said, "I need to tell you something." "About Marcus." Owen waited. "I loved him," she said simply. "He was kind to me when nobody else was. Married me despite what people said, despite my blood, despite everything. When he died in that fire, part of me died too." Her voice caught. "What I'm offering you tonight isn't love, Owen. I can't promise you that. But I can promise you honesty, an effort, and a child if God wills it. That's all I have." Owen crushed out his cigarette. "That's more than I had yesterday." She turned to look at him, and in her dark eyes he saw reflection of his own desperation. Two people with nothing left to lose, reaching for one small piece of salvation in a world that had tried to destroy them both. "I'm scared," she whispered. "So am I." She stood, holding out her hand. Owen took it, let her pull him to his feet. They walked inside together, and Owen closed the door behind them, shutting out the world and all its cruelty. What happened that night was tender and awkward and real. Two broken people finding comfort in each other, seeking not just physical release, but something deeper. Connection, hope, the possibility of creating life in the face of death. Dally kept her promise with a fierceness that took Owen's breath away. And when it was over, they lay tangled together in the darkness, listening to each other breathe. "Thank you," Owen whispered against her hair. "For what?" "For making me want tomorrow." 6 weeks later, Dally woke before dawn and stumbled outside to be sick. Owen found her on the porch, pale and shaking, one hand pressed to her stomach. When their eyes met, they both knew, against all odds, against probability and doubt, and a world that had tried to kill them both. Life had taken root. Owen dropped to his knees beside her, pressing his hand over hers against her belly where their child was growing. Tears streamed down his face, and for the first time in 5 years, they weren't tears of grief. "You did it," he choked out. "You actually did it." Dally pulled him close, and they held each other as the sun rose over the ranch, painting everything in shades of gold and promise. 7 months later, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy with his father's grey eyes and his mother's bronze skin. They named him Marcus Owen Caldwell. Owen lived to see his son's 2nd birthday before the consumption finally took him. But in those 2 years, he taught his boy to ride, to rope, to be kind in a cruel world. And when death finally came for him, Owen Caldwell died, knowing his life had meant something, that he'd left behind not just a child, but a legacy of choosing courage over fear, compassion over hatred. Dally raised their son on that ranch, teaching him about both his heritages, the Scottish stubbornness and the Shoshone strength. And every night she told him about his father, the dying rancher who'd cut down a widow from a gallows and given her back her life, and how one desperate promise between 2 broken souls had created something beautiful. Years later, when Marcus was grown with children of his own, people would ask Dally about that day in Redemption Creek, about the gallows and the rope and the choice that changed everything. She'd smile and say, "Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is offer hope when you have nothing left. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is accept it. Now we want to hear from you. Have you ever been so desperate that you made a promise you weren't sure you could keep? Or have you ever taken a risk to save someone when everyone told you to walk away? What would you have done in Owen's place? Cut the rope or walked away? Share your thoughts in the comments below and tell us where you're watching from. We love hearing from viewers all around the world.